And with my luck, this shit's gonna make me sound like a dog. So, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm reading you guys an excerpt tonight from my novel, 6 Cans a Minute, which is about the rise and fall of Monterey's Cannery Row and Spanish immigration in the 20th century. You know, people that were fleeing the Spanish Civil War and weren't conquistadors and friars. So, here we go. Love looks with the mind and not with the eyes, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. Any of you ever been divorced?
No.
Really? I have twice. Thankfully, my family has changed. This is the story of two sisters, Paloma and La Niña. Both are cannery workers. The youngest sister is La Niña. Mike is her boyfriend. The older sister, Paloma, is married to a fireman, but she is leaving him after 5 months of marriage. However, their culture and community says she does not have a good reason to leave him. Though he's a cowardly drunken philanderer, he's still her husband, until death do them part. After the trio passed the Spanish Hall, which was also the old firehouse, Paloma whispered something to La Niña, paused, then turned around, held up her chin, and said hello to the men clustered around the entryway. Paloma knew her husband was inside. It was where he was every night, whether he worked or not. A few of the men nodded back, but none said a word. Paloma's greeting was friendly, but her cat in its box angrily continued to yowl in outrage. The cat had once been a kitten the fireman rescued out of a tree and given to her as a gift. The men out front could not find their words. They were too busy looking at her body. The black curls of her hair shining under the moonlight, the impossibly tiny hourglass of her figure. The men savored with their imaginations what they could not taste with their eyes. But none moved, none spoke, until she was far enough uphill and, they thought, out of earshot. And then they began to laugh. The fireman has his hands full with that fire. She's not even worth talking about, someone said. The Rodriguez sisters are all the same. They think they're high and mighty, but there's little choice in bad fruit. Hearing the commentary, Paloma stopped, turned around, grinned at the men, and started walking back towards the Spanish Hall. This is foolishness, Mike said to La Niña. Do not expect me to follow you if she goes in there. Paloma, La Niña said, trailing after her sister. Stop. No, it is not worth making a scene. But it was too late. Paloma had already opened the door to the Spanish Hall while the men outside whistled and howled. Foolishness, Mike said. He threw the bag of Paloma's clothes on the ground. I am not following you inside. La Niña did not respond. She marched past the men with her chin in the air and followed her sister into the Spanish Hall. Miguelito, the men said. You gonna let it be like that? Foolishness, 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 Mike said as he picked up Paloma's bags and followed La Niña into the building. 2 empty chairs for Silvianas sat next to the fire engine, but there was no music. The musicians and dancers were taking a convenient break. Better than a bullfight, one said. Paloma stood in the doorway, staring at the bar where the fireman was standing lazily, holding a glass of muscatel in one hand and a long Corona cigar in the other. La Niña stood next to her sister and glared at the fireman. Together, they were 2 daggers, poised and ready for attack. This is foolishness, Mike whispered into La Niña's ear. I am staying here. I am not going to the bar with you. La Niña kept her eyes on the fireman and smacked Mike's mouth away from her ear. Foolishness is the fireman who is so drunk he can barely keep his head up, La Niña said. Foolishness is the ugly woman he has been shamelessly running around with after only 5 months of marriage. Paloma took large striding steps up to the bar. La Niña walked alongside her sister. Together, they were the poisoned tips of daggers. Both women clenched their jaws while the cat continued to yowl in its box. Paloma put the cat down at the fireman's feet. So you took the cat too, the fireman said. His eyelids were heavy and his words were slurred. Good, 'cause I ain't feeding it if you left it behind. He put down his glass of muscatel, took a drag off his cigar, and then reached out his free hand to stroke Paloma's palms. The men from outside had come back into the building and whistled. La Niña could hear the sea lions down on the wharf arfing and laughing, having their own party, mocking them all. Paloma raised her hand to the fireman's face. He was handsome, La Niña thought. She could give him that. Even slobbering drunk, he was still handsome. At first, La Niña thought her sister would slap him, but Paloma caressed the stubble of her husband's perfect jaw. Then, suddenly, in one smooth motion, Paloma took the cigar from the fireman's hand, placed it into her mouth and began to suck on the tip, never keeping her eyes off of her husband's pretty face. Paloma's boldness was dazzling. It was a standoff, it was a bullfight, and La Niña knew Paloma would win this battle, but not the war. La Niña did not need to look over her shoulder back at Mike to also know he was shaking his head and muttering, "Tell me, this is not foolishness." The whistling and hooting stopped. No one made a sound. Only the sea lions continued their barking ridiculousness while Don Juan yowled. "Okay, that's enough," La Niña said to Paloma. Paloma continued to smirk and lick and suck on the cigar while the fireman smiled and caressed her hands. "Cariño," he slurred. "On the night of a full moon, the blood runs fast. Perfect for lovemaking," Paloma said. "But you make my skin crawl." Paloma jerked her hand away and smacked it down on the counter, palm up. With her other free hand, in a dramatic gesture as if it were a fan, Paloma brought up the lit cigar and waved it into the air. "Look," she said, "the tip is orange. Soul, turn orange color. Soul, turn the color of love." She was reciting verses from the songs they all knew. The men repeated the words in howling mockery. "Soul, turn orange color," they laughed. "Soul, turn the color of love." The fireman nodded his heavy head. His eyes were barely open until his wife slammed the cigar down into her open palm. The cigar made a hissing sound as it collided with flesh. Paloma's eyes turned red and watered. La Niña did not know whether to laugh, cry, or cheer. No one in the entire Spanish hall made a sound, not even Mike, though the cat continued to yowl. This was not foolishness, La Niña decided. It was heroism. The fireman gulped, shook his head. "Ah, the sobering sweet smell of cigar and Paloma's palm," La Niña thought. "Cariño, you're crazy," the fireman said. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Paloma said, still holding the lit cigar in her palm. Her eyes were tearing and red. "You won't leave me. You can't leave me. You'll be back." He reached out his hand for Paloma's hand. "That will scar," he said. "You need ice." "Good. I want it to." "Cariño," the fireman said, "you're pathetic." Paloma took the cigar off of her palm and dropped it onto her husband's head. "Time to go," La Niña said. She picked up the yowling cat from the floor and took her sister by her shoulders back out the door. "Mike, get her some ice," La Niña said. The men from out front were still silent. La Niña had never seen Mike speechless before. He stood motionless with his arms helplessly at his sides and Paloma's bags at his feet. "Ice," La Niña told him. "Get ice. Have your eyes been so shocked that your ears no longer work?" Paloma began to sob and laugh. She held up her palm. In the center was a round red burn. "You think this hurts? It doesn't hurt. A fish cut infection hurts more. That man doesn't really smoke a cigar. The cigar was hardly lit." "It's going to leave a scar," La Niña said. "Good. I want it to," Paloma said again. "Cariño." The syllables sneered off of Paloma's tongue. Ever wonder how that word is masculine and yet machista is feminine? Mike handed Paloma a towel filled with ice and said, "Foolishness. Why did you do all this when you know you will have to return to him?" But the words were more of a gasping whisper of admiration than admonishment. Thank you.